Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams. Today I'm going to be telling you about the burger that I built for the Book of the Month Ketchup-a-thon readathon. Amy from Amy's Bookish Life and I had so much fun creating and coming up with this readathon, the Ketchup-a-thon, and we got so excited when so many of you also got so excited about this readathon. It's been so much fun on Instagram and here on YouTube, seeing people's burgers and the books that they've been reading. And we had some sprints throughout the 2 weeks. It's just been so much fun. I know many of you decided not to do Book of the Month, whether you're not subscribers or you're all caught up. Who are you if you're all caught up? How is that possible? But I did stick with Book of the Month books, and I did read 6 books throughout this 2-week period, and I'm so proud of myself. So let's just go through the burger, and I'm going to tell you what is on my burger, what kind of burger I had, and I'll let you know what burger I built. So the first prompt was to choose your burger. So I chose a turkey burger, which is a hyped book. And for that, I listened to Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I can say that it will not be my last. I did really enjoy this. Were there more sexy times than I really want or need in my romance books? For sure. It was not a clean or sweet romance whatsoever, but it was sweet in so many other ways. In this one, we follow Alexis, who is an ER doctor. She comes from a very wealthy family, and her family has all these expectations for her. Her car breaks down, and to her rescue comes Daniel, who is a ridiculously hot carpenter who lives in this small town, and she stays in the town while her car is getting fixed and begins a friendship with Daniel that blossoms very quickly into more. And Daniel is just a sweetheart of a guy. He's just a gentleman and a nice guy, and I just really enjoyed their love story. I also enjoyed it because she's 10 years older than he is. They come from very different worlds, and the struggle is to find a way to see if it could work, and I really enjoyed it. I was here for it. A lot of fun, that one. For my bun on my burger, I chose Sesame Bun, an author that I have read before. And I also listened to The Survivors by Jane Harper. This is another mystery by Jane Harper set in Australia. And let me tell you, this woman is the queen of atmosphere. Every book that I read from her is set in a different place. The Dry was set in the outback, and it was so dry and intense, and it added to the atmosphere. Force of Nature was set in like the woods in a survival wilderness experience. And then this one, The Survivors, is set along the coast, and a rocky coast, dangerous coast. The tides are strong. Right in the beginning of this, we meet a handful of people who have experienced some sort of tragedy about 12 years before. There was a huge storm, lives were lost, and some are still carrying the guilt from that day into the present timeline. Shortly after, a young woman who works at the local diner is found washed up on shore. What on earth happened? And were any of the people who were involved in the situation 12 years ago involved now? The town is kind of a touristy place, so the townies kind of band together and are convinced that it's none of them, but is it? Everyone has a little bit of secrets. It wasn't like a quick page turner, although I did read it relatively quickly. It didn't feel very fast paced and frantic that way. It kept you going. It kept you interested. She kept me interested, and it was like little bit by little bit learning more and more about people's secrets and the history of this town and what had happened before and the things that they're still hiding and keeping from the detectives and things. I really enjoy Jane Harper, and I love this book. That was my bun. Then for condiment, I have Lessons in Chemistry, and this covers all 3 condiments. I don't love mustard, but there's ketchup with the red lips, white with her eyes for mayo, and there's yellow in her hair for the mustard. So I have all 3 condiments on my burger in one book. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis is not a rom-com, as you might think from this cover. It is a historical book set in the 1950s. We follow Elizabeth Zott, who is a chemist, struggling to make a path for herself in this world, this science world that is predominantly men. During a time where women were expected to be housewives and were thought to be rather unintelligent by the men in their lives. Of course, women knew that that wasn't the truth, and Elizabeth knew that wasn't the truth, and she is blazing away through, unfortunately, along the way, has some pretty intense experiences, including a sexual assault by an advisor when she's in graduate school, preventing her from proceeding on to get her PhD. Oh no, she did get her graduate level. She couldn't get her PhD because her advisor there assaulted her, and everybody blamed her or said she's just being ridiculous, and this guy was very prestigious, and so he just got away with it, which was the case, unfortunately, quite often back in the day. It was really interesting to just get a window into that time period, the 50s and 60s, and see how women were treated so poorly and so ridiculously. So it's just very interesting to watch Elizabeth blaze a trail for herself. She does fall in love, and that relationship was so sweet and like slightly awkward. He was a chemist as well, but never doubted her intelligence and saw her as an equal. And they decided to not get married. So also during that time, she's like breaking cultural norms as far as marriage and family as well. She doesn't want to have kids and she doesn't want to get married, but they live together and it's a very positive relationship for the both of them. And then something tragic happens, and she also finds out that she is pregnant with a baby that she didn't ever want. However, that changes when she meets her baby, and she raises her to be incredibly intelligent as well, and finds herself the host of a cooking show where she is determined to not run it like other typical shows for housewives at the time, not dumbing down how she talks or her own personality. She's not going to wear tight dresses and be cutesy. She's going to be her scientific self and teach these women about chemistry and the importance of serving healthy and good food and the chemical reactions of cooking and all of this stuff. Like, she brings her chemistry to the food set, which was very interesting as well. I really liked this book. I thought it was interesting and, like I said, a good window into women's battle to be a part of the workforce during that time. And it was a very interesting read. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Oh, I should say, these were also both 4-star reads for me. All 3. 4, 4, 4. So that is my condiments. And then for toppings, I have a topping that I don't love, pickles. But a pickle, the prompt for pickles was a book of the month that someone else encouraged you to buy or influenced you to pick. And for me, I read Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. This was during August of 2021. I was not sure if I was going to skip the month or pick one of the books. And a couple people said they were picking this one. I'm like, okay, I'll pick that one too. I don't know that they had actually read it and said that it was a book I would like because I didn't really care for this. I gave it 2 stars because I finished it, and there were definitely parts that were interesting. I liked learning about wolves and how they influence a whole environment. I felt that was like the biology of that, and I just found that to be very interesting. And I also liked the sister relationships. So Inti and Aggie are twin sisters, and they're very, very, very close. Aggie, for a long part of the book, is basically mute, and they sign to each other because of a trauma that happened. And gradually we learn about what that trauma was, and I was not here for that story. There was, like, it's a super short book, and there were parts that were boring, which shouldn't happen in a super short book. And I also think that it was a little more literary than I normally like, but there were things that I thought was okay. I ended up giving it 2 stars. Like I said, I finished it. It was okay read. It's not one that I would necessarily recommend to a lot of people. It does deal with a lot of heavy things, a lot of, I don't know. I think as I'm talking about it, I found it more interesting than I think I found it. Yeah, there's some relationships in here that I didn't care about. Basically, the story is Inti is the head of this team of people who are bringing wolves to the Highlands in Scotland. So we also have that whole atmosphere in Scotland where it's the wilderness, basically. But the wilderness has been destroyed in a lot of ways because back in the day, Scottish farmers and hunters got rid of all the wolves. There was even like rewards for hunting and killing wolves. So the people in the town, the farmers, did not care as much about these people coming in to bring the wolves back. And some of them were very antagonistic about it all. I don't know. It was interesting, but it was just okay for me. 2 stars. I'm sticking with it. I'll end with my 2 favorites, which is so perfect. So let's do bacon. Let's do bacon next. That will be my most anticipated book of the month. And Other Birds was on my anticipated reads for this year. This is by Sarah Addison Allen. And I had so much fun in one of our live reading sprint chats. A handful of people did not care for this book and they DNF'd it relatively early. And I was like, I am going to like this book. And I was right. And I gave it 5 stars. I will say this. It is different from other books that she has written. She is, like I have said before, writes very charming, magical realism that's very light and fun and kind of quirky. This one is not magical realism, but it's more supernatural. There are a couple of characters in here who are ghosts. And so that's very different. Is it still quirky? 100%. But this is the story of a found family becoming a found family. The setting is at this island, Mallow Island, South Carolina, in particular in the Delawisp building. It's this condo building that has 5 apartments in it. And we get to meet the 5 apartment owners as well as the man who runs the Delawisp. It's in a gated area. And Zoe, at the very beginning, moves in. The mom has left her the condo and her mom passed away. And so 12 years later, Zoe is now 18 or 19. She has been kind of kicked out, or she moves out from her dad and stepmother's home where once her dad remarried, she was never really wanted, never really loved. And so she moves to where her mom used to live, into this condo at the Delawisp. She's determined when she gets there that she's going to get to know all the other people who live in the building and they're going to all be friends. We do get to learn a little bit about each of these people and the past hurts and baggage that they're bringing with them into the present day. And we kind of watch as they all begin to care for each other. And it's really quite beautiful. It is quirky. It's strange. There are these turquoise birds called Delawisps that the building is named after. There's an author who had like a one-hit wonder kind of a book that is now a part of the tale as well. And very early on in the story, one of the older women who is a sister to another condo owner passes away. And Zoe is tasked with cleaning out her apartment because she was basically a hoarder. So we learn a lot of things throughout all of this. And I just fell in love with it. I found it also to be charming and quirky, like her other books. It had a lot of depth in these stories and the hurt that they bring to them, but it wasn't heavy, really. It was still light. Not light in a cheesy way, but I don't know. I just loved it. I just loved it. So that's Other Birds. It was my bacon, most anticipated, and I'm so glad that I read it. And I read it with Amy, which was also very fun. And then finally, I have a book that could be a cheese because it's one of my largest book of the month. We did say 500 or more pages, but not very many books not many book of the month actually have 500 pages. They just look like they do. So this one has 480 something. It's also my lettuce because it's a historical, so that's my go-to genre. And then it's also a tomato because it's a fast-paced read. I read this in just a couple of days. And that is The Attic Child by Lola J. I'm so glad I threw this into one of my boxes at one point. It was an add-on for me. And was it the same month? It was the same month. What a good month this was, September. Just last month. Look at me reading my current book of the month. Okay, this was such a story. Oh, man. We followed 2 kids, 2 different timelines, 100 years apart, who both end up being shut up in this attic of the same house. And the one in the 1970s discovers items and some carvings on the wall left there by the one 100 years earlier in the 1870s. One of them is a story of a little boy who was taken from his homeland in Africa by a white man who wanted him to be his companion and his savior. He wanted to be the savior of this little boy and bringing him to England and dressing him up, sending him to school. Things don't happen quite the way either of them expects. And the people who own the home afterwards and receive this inheritance from that first man, what's his name? Sir Richard Babington. The people who receive Babington's inheritance end up locking Celestine up in the attic. And it's horrible, 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 horrible the way he's treated. We also follow Laura, who was an orphan. Her parents both die when she's quite young. And her dad's wife, the stepmom, is the one who is very abusive and locks her in the attic. The thing is, for the first 100 or so pages, neither of these 2 kids gets put in the attic. So there's this mystery of like, what is going on? How is this even going to happen? It kept me turning pages for sure. And then we get to this whole middle part where both of them experience such trauma and abuse, and then are able to escape from it and how that happens. And then the whole ending, the way that these two storylines end up connecting is so cool. I just really was along for the ride. Lola J brought me on a ride. I cried. I was eager to know the next thing that was going to happen. She definitely could write a story. I was here for it. I gave it 5 stars. I would recommend it if you can handle that middle part. That's pretty heavy. But it does end on an upswing. It ends on an upswing, which is good. But the ending had me crying too, but in a different way. So here's my burger. 6 books for Ketchup-a-thon. I'm so excited to have these 6 books knocked off of my TBR, my book of the month TBR. I still have quite a few more, but I have 6 less now. I would love to hear from you. How did your burger building go? Did you read book of the month books? Did you read other books? Either way is totally fine and acceptable. Did you think the same way of me of any of these if you've read them? Are any added to your TBR now? Let's chat about anything that you want to down in the comments below. I always love talking to you down there. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.